Windows 95 running on a Wyse Vx0 thin client. It's been almost 5 years since I did my video on the V90 LE thin client where I had installed Windows 98 and got some Windows 98 games running on it as well as some DOS games within the Windows environment. But I've always wanted to get Windows 95 working on one of these, and I also would like to get audio working under actually booting into a DOS mode, native DOS, and we finally pulled it off with this machine. And the reason I got the cover off here so you can see the one unique part in here, and that's this Radeon 7000 mobility, I think it's a Radeon 7000 mobility chipset installed on this little, I don't know what you would call this thing, it's like an add-on card. This thing mounts where I had the PCM CIA slot in the other computer, and it actually offers up a DVI VGA combo port so you can connect it to the VGA monitor or DVI over that. And this was the one thing that was keeping me from getting Windows 95 working, because while I could get chipset drivers and everything else running on here, I could not get the onboard video to work properly. Well, this takes care of that problem. And the good thing about the Radeon card is it offers much better compatibility in DOS games. So let's take a look at this thing. Here we are in the BIOS, and just a couple quick things I want to show in here. Under the frequency control, you can actually change the CPU multiplier to anything between 4 and 8, so the processor will run anywhere between 400 and 800 megahertz. That could be useful for slowing down some DOS games, but for Windows right now we're going to set this to 8. And two other things here. Under integrated peripherals, now you don't have to change this if you're running Windows 98, but under Windows 95 there's no support for USB 2.0. It'll only run under 1.1 speed, so we actually have to disable the EHCI controller. That's the USB 2 controller. And under advanced chipset features, this is regardless of what operating system you're running, you have to change your display card priority. If you have this add-on Radeon card, you have to change this to PCI slot. AGP is for the onboard video, and if you leave it at that, then the output will just come out of the other DVI port that's on the back. Now there is some dual monitor support for this, like you can actually output video to both monitors, but it's pretty buggy, and anytime you drag windows back and forth between the two screens, it just, the windows, they glitch out. Here we are booted into Windows 95, and the first thing I want to go through is some of the items in the device manager here so you can see what all I had to set up on here to get this working. This CD-ROM support, this is actually a result of me installing Daemon tools, and this allows for virtual CD images to be mounted. I think it supports up to 4, so you'll see right now I have Midtown Madness mounted as a virtual image, and I'll be testing some games here in a little bit. The other part of that is this SCSI controller. From what I've read, I wasn't sure what this was, but I think this is the other piece of the Daemon tools. Under disk drives, I didn't have to install any drivers for this, and you'll note that it does support DMA mode, so we get pretty fast transfer speeds on this. This is just one of those little 16 gigabyte Discon modules like I had in my other build. Hard drive controllers, this is all pretty standard stuff. Under the network adapters, I was able to find a driver for the onboard VIA Ethernet port. We have parallel and serial port support on here. Sound, this was a fun one. This one took me forever to find a driver for. I ended up finding a really old driver from 2002 that got this to work. None of the new ones worked on Windows 95 at all. This is actually an older VXD driver. It actually works good. Now, the one thing that doesn't work on here in Windows, I couldn't get support for Soundblaster emulation, but it doesn't matter because we can run that natively in DOS. And again, I'm going to show that in a little bit here as well. All our system devices show up in here without any problems. No red exclamation points or X's, and this was all just native. I don't believe I installed any chipset drivers to get this stuff working. Lastly, USB. There is a USB driver that somebody created a few years ago that gives USB support to Windows 95, and I'm going to put links to all these drivers in the video description here if I can track all this stuff down. But what this allows for is I can plug a flash drive into here. In fact, let me grab one. So I've got just a 4 gig flash drive that I'm going to plug right into my front USB port here. It'll show up as an unknown device, as a general mass storage. You just click next to these prompts. And there we go. You'll see now we have a dismount option down here for it. when we go into my computer, there it is, removable disk. And it actually gives it a drive letter of A. Like I said earlier, it does run at 1.1 speed, but for Windows 95 and the size of the files you would ever be transferring on here, that's more than sufficient. Okay, so I'm going to dismount that disk. We'll click Stop Disk. Now safe to unplug. Alright. Now I'm going to take a look at a few benchmarks. The first one here is a really old one. This is called OpenGL Bench, and this is what will show that the OpenGL actually does work on here. And here's the executable for that. And you'll see we have OpenGL support here. And when you press the space bar, we can go through all the different tests on here. Some of them actually run with pretty good frame rates, like this one's running over 100. And a lot of these just run in the 20 or 30 FPS range, but given the hardware limitations, that's not surprising. But it is functional. And there we go. So let's get out of there. So the other OpenGL test that I want to show off here is Half-Life 1. So in the configuration menu here, you'll see when we go into video and go under, I think it's video modes, we're running OpenGL 1024 by 768. Click OK to that. And let's go right to the train ride.
Good morning and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System. This automated train is provided for the security and convenience of the Black Mesa Research Facility personnel. The time is 8:47.
You'll see this game actually runs pretty smoothly on here.
High of 105. The Black Mesa
Even at
at a
1024
pleasant
by
68
768
degrees
resolution.
at all times.
If you notice the audio is only in mono, that's just because of how I have to set up here to capture my microphone real time. I'm basically sharing my audio channels. I have one of the channels going to sound from the computer and the other one going to my microphone. Because I found that when I did my last video, it was a lot of extra work doing audio rather doing voice capture after the fact. So it's easier for me to just do this real time.
Transit hub in Area 9 and board a high security train. If
Okay,
you
let's
have
skip
not
ahead to
yet
where he gets out of the
submitted
train
your
here.
identity to the retinal clearance system.
Here we are entering and wandering around the building a little bit here.
Good to see you. Hey, Mr. Freeman. I had a bunch of
Everything's very
messages for you,
responsive.
but we
The
had a
game
system
is more than playable on here.
The sample was just delivered to the test.
Okay, so here we go. I am playing with a keyboard because one of the limitations of Windows 95 is that the only type of gaming controller you can use on here is one that connects to a 15-pin game port. And since this machine doesn't have one of those, I am limited to keyboard. Now under Windows 98, you can connect to USB gaming controllers. That'd give you a lot more options here, and that might, if there's one really good reason to stick with Windows 98 on this machine, that would be it. There is an open source project in the works right now that looks kind of interesting. Someone has created a little device that'll connect right up to the keyboard's PS2 port, and it will let you connect a USB gaming controller. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. I'm hoping those get commercially produced sometime, because if they do, that would really give options to some of these older computers, in particular older laptops that are Windows 95, and in my case this. Because I couldn't collect a lot of gems with my keyboard controller, I'm not going to get through that door. But you can see, this runs very smoothly. Now we're going to leap into the lava. If I can even get there. There we go. So next up on my list here is PGA Tour 96. This is a great old golf sim. See, those flyby videos play pretty smoothly on here. And these golf sims are actually really well suited to keyboards for your control because they were designed around a keyboard. So here I just use the space bar to swing my club. Wow, that rolled way past. And the mouse to click OK after each shot.
This very long putt should break slightly to the left.
Ooh, that came up short.
This short putt should break slightly to the left.
Yep, that looks just like me on the golf course.
This short putt should be straight in.
There we go. And a bogey. Just like real life golf. Next I'm going to check out NBA Live 98. Now this game requires that a CD be inserted, and that's where USB support for the external drive comes in handy. So I've got my NBA Live 98 CD installed right into that drive. That's connected to a USB port, and now it should launch. And we'll just let the computer control this for a minute.
Hello and welcome to the game. I'm Vern Lundquist. Chicago controls the pitch. Number 89 to Harper. From the left side to Longley. To Harper. Takes the fadeaway jumper. He misfires. From the right side to Malone. He goes up with a jumper.
The last Windows game I'm going to check out here is Midtown Madness. This is the original one. Now I also tested this on the other Wyse unit, but seems to actually play a little bit better on here on the Radeon card. So this one also requires a CD, and this is where I'm going to demonstrate my daemon tools. So you'll see we have the actual ISO file mounted as a virtual disk, and it's mounted as drive D, so when we launch our game, it detects a CD. So in our graphics settings, we're going to run this at 800 by 600. Once you go any higher than that, the game does start to slow down a little bit. That way we can still maintain some pretty good clip distance and lighting quality for everything, because we're running everything at pretty high details here. So let's go ahead and check this out.
You know those scientists who say the closest distance between two places is a straight line? Yeah, well, I think they're lying.
This I can control with the mouse. This doesn't control too badly. Wish I had a controller for this, but the mouse is okay. Let's wreck the car. Oh, we're not dead yet. This should finish her off. Gotta hit something though. There we go.
Damage penalty. Your race is done.
Just a couple quick things I wanted to mention here before I boot into DOS and show some DOS games. Natively, I could not get my scroll wheel to work on this mouse under Windows 95, so I found a driver online here that added support for that. I'll see if I can find this driver again, and if I can, I'll put a link to that in the notes. And oh yeah, the internet. Now there's obviously very limited support for web browsing on Windows 95, but the RetroZilla web browser does give us a little bit of very simple browsing capabilities, I guess you could say. Let's see what the National Weather Service page looks like on here. I'm guessing probably not great. It loads okay, I guess. I'm surprised that actually displays properly on here. So yeah, your mileage is obviously going to vary, but some stuff might load fine on here for you. Okay, on to DOS. Here we are at our boot menu. Now I didn't show this when I booted into Windows 95, but I set this up so that there's a boot option. You can choose between either DOS or Windows when you turn the machine on. So let's boot into DOS. Now right away here you'll see when I load DOS, that there's a couple things we load here, and this is all related to the audio support. This is a Soundblaster emulation program that somebody developed pretty recently here, and same thing, I'll put a link to this. And if I can piece all this together here, I'll put a link to, actually let me just show this. So here's how we set this up. So once you download and extract these files, you're going to have to run the GemX memory manager, and in fact that doesn't show up here. That actually loads, let me get out of here. I think that's in config.sys, yes. So this was how I set up my menu here for booting into Windows or DOS. And when we go into DOS, we do have to load the GemX memory manager. Now this is a slightly modified version that comes with the SPEMU program, which I'm going to put a link to that in the description. You'll see there's nothing special we got to do for Windows. But let me go back to the auto executable. So here's the various things that we got to run here. And you'll see I added this too. I added CT mouse, so we have mouse support. And the rest of this is what all sets up the audio emulation. Get out of there. And you'll see that when it runs there, we end up with an IRQ of 7. And it detected the sound card, the VT82XX AC97. Now this runs on a lot of different AC97 sound chips. It's worked on just about everything I've tested it on. And it works particularly well on this machine. So go into my DOS folder here. So I have some games in here I want to check out. There's one game I'm going to check out with my microphone still on, and that's Alien Breed. This is a game that's notoriously difficult to get to run on anything, but it surprisingly runs fine on here. Show that just for the music. That's very different. Most hardware will not run this properly with the music. So in game, you'll see this shares sound between the onboard speaker and also the sound card. Those noises are coming from the onboard speaker in the Wyse unit. I am terrible at this game. Okay, that's enough of that. So now I'm going to shut off my external microphone here and close out this video with some gameplay from different DOS games that run fine on here.
Damn, those alien bastards are gonna pay for shooting up my ride.